Flags of the United States and China split screen, followed by a world map with global political boundaries. The rivalry between the United States and China is shaping the 21st century. As the world's two largest economies and global superpowers, their interactions affect everything from global trade to military strategy. In this video, we'll dive into the history of their relationship, the current geopolitical situation, and examine how other countries align themselves in this growing divide. Historical background: the origins of US-China relations, 19th century, early interactions and open-door policy. Historical depictions of early US-China trade and diplomacy. The US and China first engaged in the 19th century through trade and diplomacy. The US promoted an open-door policy in the late 1800s, encouraging equal trading rights in China and resisting colonialism, though imperialist tensions loomed. World War II and post-war alignments. World War II era footage showing Chinese forces fighting alongside the US during World War II. The US supported Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces in the fight against Japan, creating a temporary alliance. After the war, China's Communist Revolution in 1949 split the two nations, with the US recognizing Taiwan as a legitimate government and China aligning with the Soviet Union. Cold War shifts and Nixon's visit, 1972. Richard Nixon meeting Mao Zedong. The Cold War saw China and the US on opposing sides, but in 1972, US President Richard Nixon visited Mao Zedong in China, leading to the normalization of relations. This was a strategic move by both countries to isolate the Soviet Union, altering the balance of power in global politics. Current situation: areas of conflict and cooperation, trade war and economic competition. News footage of the US-China trade war, tariffs, and economic graphs. The modern rivalry intensified with the US-China trade war that started in 2018. The US, under Donald Trump, accused China of intellectual property theft, unfair trade practices, and currency manipulation. Tariffs were imposed by both sides, impacting global markets. Under the Biden administration, tensions continue, though there have been efforts to manage the economic relationship. Technology race, 5G and artificial intelligence. Graphics of 5G networks, AI technology, and competition in the tech sector. The US and China are also engaged in a technological race, particularly in areas like 5G technology, artificial intelligence, and semiconductors. The US has restricted Chinese tech giants like Huawei, while China continues to build its own technology sector, challenging the US's dominance in innovation. Military tensions, Taiwan and the South China Sea. Military exercises, Taiwan Strait, and South China Sea disputes. Military tensions between the two nations are most apparent in the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. China considers Taiwan a breakaway province, while the US supports Taiwan through arms sales and military alliances, increasing the risk of conflict. In the South China Sea, China has built military outposts on disputed islands, while the US conducts freedom of navigation operations to counter China's territorial claims. Human rights and diplomatic disputes. Protests over Uyghur Muslim treatment and Hong Kong unrest. Human rights concerns further strain relations, with the US condemning China's actions in Xinjiang, where over 1 million Uyghur Muslims have been detained, and in Hong Kong, where pro-democracy movements have been suppressed. China views these criticisms as interference in its internal affairs. Allies, who supports the US and China. US allies: NATO, Quad meetings with India, Japan, and Australia, and the EU. the US has built a coalition of allies to counter China's rise. Key allies include members of NATO, the European Union, and countries in the Indo-Pacific like Japan, South Korea, and Australia. The Quad Alliance, which includes the US, India, Japan, and Australia, is focused on countering China's influence in Asia. US military bases in the Pacific and joint exercises with allies. The US has also deepened its military partnerships in the region, conducting joint exercises with South Korea, the Philippines, and Thailand, among others, to project power in the Pacific and defend against potential Chinese aggression. China's allies. Chinese military exercises, Russia-China summits, and BRICS meetings. China's closest ally is Russia, with whom it shares strategic and military interests. Both countries seek to challenge Western dominance. Other countries aligned with China include Pakistan, which relies on Chinese economic and military support, and nations participating in China's Belt and Road Initiative, like Iran, Venezuela, and many African countries. Belt and Road projects, Chinese-built infrastructure in Africa. China has used its economic clout to gain influence in Africa, Latin America, and Central Asia, building infrastructure and investing in resource-rich countries. These nations, in turn, often support China's geopolitical goals. Neutral countries and global balance. India, Southeast Asian countries, and Europe. Countries like India and Vietnam maintain neutral or balanced relationships with both the US and China. India, while part of US-led initiatives like the Quad, also maintains significant economic ties with China. The European Union similarly criticizes China on human rights issues while engaging in major trade with both powers. Global rivalries, US and China supporting opposing sides. US support for rival countries. US support for Taiwan, Ukraine, and Southeast Asia. The US supports countries and regions that are at odds with China, most notably Taiwan, where arms sales continue to increase despite China's warnings. Additionally, in the broader global context, the US backs Ukraine in its conflict with Russia, a key ally of China. China's support for rival countries. Chinese support for Iran, North Korea, and Russia. China, in turn, supports rival countries that oppose US influence. It has maintained a strategic partnership with North Korea, providing economic and military support. China also aligns with Iran, particularly in opposing US sanctions, and strengthens its military and energy ties with Russia. The future of US-China relations, what's next? Economic and technological decoupling. Infographics of US and China's economic decoupling, supply chain shifts. As tensions escalate, many experts predict further economic decoupling, particularly in key sectors like technology and critical industries. Both nations are looking to reduce dependence on each other, which will have significant impacts on global trade and economic stability. Potential for military confrontation. Simulations of military maneuvers in the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea. Military confrontations, particularly over Taiwan or the South China Sea, remain a real possibility. Both nations are rapidly modernizing their forces, and miscalculations could lead to conflict with far-reaching consequences for the global order. Diplomatic opportunities. International summits and diplomatic meetings. However, there are still opportunities for diplomacy, as both countries realize that total decoupling is neither feasible nor desirable. Future dialogues may focus on cooperation in areas like climate change, global health, and trade regulations. A closing montage of US and Chinese leaders, military visuals, and a global map. The US-China conflict is shaping the world's future, with both cooperation and competition affecting global peace and prosperity. What do you think? Will the rivalry escalate, or can diplomacy win the day? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more insights into global geopolitics.